Hello, everyone, and welcome to Virtual FinTech Fair presents India and China FinTech at the time of COVID-19. We bring this presentation to you with our knowledge partners Medici and our diamond sponsors Invest Hong Kong. Thank you all for joining in across Asia. We've had a lot of signups from everywhere, and we look forward to presenting a good thought leadership webinar to you where we're speaking about what is the state of fintech in India and China. We'll also look at Medici presenting about interesting insights over the last year in the field. And lastly, we'll be talking, which will be the main webinar, which will be the panel discussion with thought leaders from both India and China and Hong Kong, discussing the state of play in the market. My name is Mushir Ahmed. I am founder of FinTech Asia and co-founder of the Virtual FinTech Fair. In addition to that, I'm also a co-founder of the FinTech Association of Hong Kong and India Tech Hong Kong. Today, we will start off with a presentation and discussion on the Indian and Chinese FinTech ecosystem and a brief introduction to the Virtual FinTech Fair by me. Just give me a second and we can get to that. So when we look at the Indian ecosystem, as most of you will be aware, we have 1.3 billion people with over 440 million millennials, close to 400 million Generation Zers, right? India's GDP is expected to grow between 6 to 8%. And we've seen that the internet users will was expected to reach 720 million by end of 2019. And we have seen that it has actually now reached about 750 million, half of which are from rural India. Rural India is the fastest growing internet market for India, largely driven by players like Jio. India is the third largest global startup ecosystem and provides an employment to over 200,000 people as per the statistics we have. In addition, the digital payment sector in India is estimated to grow to over $1 trillion US, which is going up almost 20 times from what the value was in 2017. Interesting note from the wealth management side is that only 2% of India invest in market traded securities and only 12% actively use online banking. So there's a big opportunity there. While financial services is likely to grow 2.5 times the real GDP. So fintech can be looking at a growth sector in the coming years. And of course, India and China jointly have the highest fintech adoption as per the EY adoption index for last year. Yeah. Now, a snapshot of the Indian startup ecosystem. We have, as I said, close to about 9,000 startups were initiated during the last 5 years. And you're seeing that in 2019, there were close to 1,500 startups that came about, including 7 unicorns with funding of close to $5 billion. Indian unicorns, as you can see, India has now the third number in terms of number of unicorns globally after the US and China, with 18 unicorns out of the 250 globally, right? And here's a snapshot of the ones that have been growing. This is across sectors, including fintech. Now, a lot of India's fintech has grown based on a unique infrastructure built by the government known as the India Stack. The India Stack provides an technology layer of which on which a lot of different services can be built. Number one being the Aadhaar Universal ID system, which has over 1.2 billion Indians having given their biometric details and mapped on that. Secondly is the DigiLocker. Then comes UPI, one of the world's foremost payments interface, which now is transacting billions of dollars on a monthly basis and is the backbone of the Indian fintech and payments ecosystem. eSign and eKYC are other enablers for the ecosystem based on India Stack. This is a snapshot of the Indian fintech market. Payments and lending tend to lead the way. However, wealth tech and B2B solutions are also becoming very important in the coming days. This is a number of fintech startups that came about in the last few years. As you can see, quite a bit of growth in India after the US and China. And by segments, payment, lending, and wealth tech are leading the way. Main regions for fintech would be Bangalore, which is the tech capital, followed by Mumbai, the financial capital, and then what is known as the national capital region near New Delhi, including Gurugram and Noida. A lot of Indian startups are keen to expand globally, and you can see that over 90% of Indian startups, when they from day one, are targeting not just the Indian market but a global market as well. Coming to the Chinese ecosystem, as we know, the world's most populous ecosystem with the highest number of internet users, close to 900 million internet users and 850 million smartphones, highest in the world. The number of rural internet users are comparatively lesser though, but it's expected to grow in the coming months with a big focus on the rural part of China, especially the western half of the country, which is not as developed as the rest of the country. 90% of payments in China are facilitated via mobile payments, and about 600 million people are using, mobile for making payments, which is a significantly uh, big number. And the value of the China's mobile payment is $40 trillion, which is over 25 times the US payment ecosystem, largely because the 90% of payments going through mobile uh, platforms. In addition, subjects and activities such as JD.com's recent Singles Day and Valentine's Day sales for the Chinese Valentine's Day sale, as well as the 11/11 sales by Alibaba, are big factors in driving e-commerce in China, which is again run largely through the mobile phones. They have more than 7 trillion of investable wealth currently, which is on low interest rate, but that's an area that we see growing. People buying financial products in China has also grown to over 120 million over the last year, and expected to continue to grow as more people are comfortable buying and purchasing products online, especially financial products. Internet penetration, we've already touched on this. One interesting statistics on the Chinese internet startups is 46% of them make unicorn status within 2 years, with an average time of 4 years, which is less than half of what happens in the US. Interesting note, as you may have heard, and Financial, the world's most valuable unicorn with valuation between 150 to $200 billion, is looking to list soon. This is according to Reuters, and this may happen on the Hong Kong exchange in the coming days. Now, as I mentioned, and Financial comes out of Alibaba. Basically, it was created to facilitate e-commerce transactions for Alibaba in the mid 2000s, and started off with Alipay, and now covers a whole gamut of services from money market funds to insurance to lending, as well as digital banking. Tencent and Baidu have also gotten into the same space, and in the recent past, Jingdong.com, so JD.com, have also got into it. While another big player in the fintech space would be Ping An, who started off as a large insurance player, but now offer quite a few technology services on top of that. China is a largely cashless economy, especially in the urban world, where 84% of people are very comfortable going out without cash. About 70% say they can survive with less than 100 renminbi, works out to be about 15 US dollars for nearly a month, right? Which is remarkable. The payment market is largely split between Alibaba and WeChat, with WeChat having a lot of growth in the recent past as compared to Alibaba, largely because WeChat started around 2013-14, leveraging of the ELIC program, which was initiated in 2013, which got them the big growth in their numbers. Now, we would like to quickly brief you on the virtual FinTech Fair before I hand over to Ahmed to give us an overview of the current FinTech landscape in Asia and the scenario this year. The virtual FinTech Fair is Asia's premier virtual FinTech Fair, which is brought to you by FinStep Asia and Navsphere Media. It is a 2-day event which we are looking to connect startups from India, China, Hong Kong, and other countries within the region, including ASEAN, India, and the Middle East. We're looking to have more than 3,000 delegates, globally renowned speakers, 50 startups, and we already have delegates from over 60 countries who have registered on our platform over the past month. Some key thought leaders for your reference, ranging from big firms such as IBM, Citibank, HSBC, all the way to young, promising fintechs in terms of unicorns, etc. including Tonic Bank, and we have the likes of Jumio, and we have players from Middle East and Thailand as well. Here's a quick look at our agenda. Our agenda is focused on 8 themes across fintech. We're looking to cover subjects such as AI and big data, look at regulations and regtech, insurtech, look at talent, digital assets, and blockchain. Of course, payments and wealth is a major part of what we talk about, and we are discussing Islamic fintech and the growth of fintech in the Middle East. This will be a fully virtual experience via a world-leading virtual platform. You'll be able to have an immersive experience as attendees, where you can go and see the conference, but also interact with innovative companies from across the region. Be able to chat with them via text or video interface as well, and you'll also be able to do interaction with each other in the lounge. Just a snapshot of how the interface will look. This will be how the lobby will look, and we'll have the exposure for all of our sponsors and different elements of where you can go on the exhibition. This is the lounge where people can interact and discuss with each other and go to different parts of the event. This is how some of the booths will look when you head over. And of course, these are our variety of partners, our valuable partners across Asia who have supporting our event and beyond, including partners of over 15 fintech associations in the region. Our lead diamond partners are Invest Hong Kong and FinTech HK, and our session sponsors are Jumio, with knowledge partners being Medici and other PR partners at Cognito and at Factors, and our media partners at Jumpstart and Zenith Media. Thank you so much for your time and listening in. I will be back with the discussion for the panel discussion, and I would now hand over to Mr. Amit Goel, founder of Medici, and who will be speaking on the Asian landscape in the last 6 months. Amit, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mushir. Always a pleasure. Let me just share my screen. You can see my screen, right? Okay. So it's always fascinating to talk about Asia fintech. Asia has a bunch of frontier fintech markets today, which we'll be talking about. I'll be talking about in this presentation. The way that everybody else outside Asia is looking at, how sort of fintech is evolving is great. I mean, it's happening across technology markets, but specifically in fintech, it's been a major trend that sort of Asian fintech innovation is kind of leading. If you look at China, how the social life, financial life, and retail life of a person has sort of converged in a super app seamlessly, is kind of setting standards for everyone else globally. And it is also now quite evident from the data that we see on the Medici platform. So we track about 14,000 fintech startups, and some of the finest financial services experiences today being benchmarked globally are actually coming from Asia, and that's why I think there's an explosion of fintech startups in the region. So this is coming from our Medici platform, and we basically are looking at this chart where it shows the number of fintech startups which are there currently, across different regions. So as you can see, right, about 6-7 years back when we started tracking, the startups on the platform, Asia was quite small, almost sort of half the size. America was kind of, even at that time was around sort of 3,000 startups. So Asia, the number of new fintech startups that have come up is really phenomenal. And in case you were thinking like, where is this data coming from? I just wanted to quickly show you that, this is the Medici platform. We basically have the startup scanner. So we track about, 14,000 startups and with a lot of filters. So I have basically taken data from this to kind of show you today, sort of, how the landscape looks like. There's one more very interesting thing that we have to look at when it comes to Asia, right? often the role of regulators is not talked about as much, but I think the Asian regulators have done a great job in terms of deregulation or sort of bringing in better regulations, right? So what I mean by that is, I'll give you 4 examples. Um, they are actually looking at how we can bring in technology to better financial services for the customer, but at the same time, the transactions have to be secure and fast and real time. So what they have done is 4 things. One, different sort of regions are working on a version of open banking. Some of them through mandate, through a regulation, like in Hong Kong, Australia or South Korea, and some of them are mostly market driven, like it is in China or India. And second thing which is happening is in terms of the licenses, right? So a lot of these countries, which we'll talk about in the virtual banking section in this deck, are opening up new digital only bank licenses, right? So this is going to help a lot in bringing in new players and providing some competition to the incumbents, right? The other thing is the basic sort of infrastructure. Say, for example, if you look at payments in countries like India, they have opened up the complete payment stack so that any third party, or any technology company can actually build on that and provide better experiences. So the opening up of infrastructure is a big theme in Asia. And then finally, I would say it is also going to very niche areas. Like if you see transit payments, which is a huge opportunity, right? Equivalent to almost retail payments opportunity. There as well, the stack is opening up, the infrastructure is being opened up so that more and more players can actually participate in the market. And that's why you see in different parts of Asia, you see ride-hailing companies, you see companies like coming from e-commerce and social background, to even companies coming from other consumer tech or other consumer fields, being able to now participate and kind of provide financial services using technology to the customer. So the role of regulators should not be neglected in terms of whether it be opening up the licenses or open banking or open transit payments or opening up the payments infrastructure. So what is the result of that, right? So the result of that is that today, if you look at it, there's a whole bunch of sort of fintech startups which are there in different countries within Asia, right? So China, of course, is leading the pack. It's a frontier nation as far as fintech is concerned globally. India has more than 2,000 fintech startups, as you can see here. What I've also done is I have put a few segments which are kind of leading in these countries. Hong Kong has more than 200 startups. Singapore has more than 500 startups. Indonesia is coming up really well, a very large market with a lot of infrastructure development happening, 300 plus fintech startups. And the reason for that is, as I was explaining earlier, the opening up, the deregulation, and making it easier for new players to enter in. Now let's look at the trend in terms of funding. So we basically track funding on an ongoing basis, almost on a daily, hourly basis for these 14,000 companies. So this is a quick snapshot of from January to June. Now, in terms of the COVID-19 impact, let's start there. You would imagine that there's going to be a lot of impact, but we have not largely seen that. Typically, 3.3 or 3.4 billion dollars average monthly in fintech funding happens globally in this space, and we have seen in the last 6 months, on an average, it has been around the average. It's been a little bit up, a little bit down in a few months, but we have not seen a very sort of drastic downfall in terms of funding. So that's good news. Especially if you look at global, I think US is still very strong. US, UK. In Asia, India and Singapore are kind of the ones which have really, really sort of, the companies have been able to raise a lot of money during the last 6 months. The only dampener we have seen is in terms of China. So China, the fintech funding has actually gone down drastically over the last 6 months. It used to kind of lead the pack globally and certainly in Asia. In fact, in June, there were only a handful or just like a couple of deals which happened, which is usually in tens and hundreds. So that's kind of an outlier. But otherwise, as I said, fintech funding has not really taken a big beating. But you have to also look at sort of studying fintech funding and understanding the kind of analysis is very nuanced, because the COVID-19 impact might actually start appearing from now onwards, right? So a lot of these deals that you are seeing actually happened in, say, the last 2 quarters of the last year and in January, February. and since then, all the different steps in terms of negotiations and due diligence have happened. So these deals are actually not really reflective of the COVID-19 impact. So we will see as we go forward. We continuously track and publish this data. As I was talking about virtual banking or open banking, right? Virtual banking or digital-only banks. I think these are the 5 countries where a lot of action is happening. Obviously Hong Kong seems to be paying the most amount of attention. They issued 8 licenses, followed by South Korea and Taiwan, where 3 licenses have been issued so far, and then Philippines 1. And then Singapore is actually sort of coming up with licenses in which out of 5, 2 of them are for both retail and corporate customers. Now, a special mention for Hong Kong because I think they have really gone ahead and sort of brought like these 8 licenses in place, and then a bunch of them have actually launched. So I think 2 or 3 of them have launched. Two of them are in beta phase, and some of them are still in stealth. But this is providing ample amount of competition in the market, and we are already seeing better sort of interest rates or reduced minimum deposits and reduced fees and stuff like that in the market, which is kind of always good to have more competition in the market. I think what is also happening apart from this is, just last few thoughts, I wanted to keep it brief, is that there's a lot of unbundling which happened in the last 6-7 years in fintech, and right now there's a growing trend of rebundling, where a lot of fintech companies are actually even if they started in payments, they are adding lending. They are also beginning to sell insurance and mutual funds. In fact, some of them are going ahead and even acquiring licenses in other verticals as well. For example, Paytm just got Paytm's founder and the company also announced that they are going after a insurance license in India, and we have seen that sort of across the markets. Each of the regional markets is kind of very different. For example, if you see Indonesia, very large market, a lot of competition between 2 large consumer tech companies, Gojek and Grab. If you look at Vietnam, growing really, really fast, lots of new startups coming up. The banks and FIs are paying a lot of attention to partnering with these tech companies. If you look at India, the biggest story has been, as Mushir was talking about, how to create the financial infrastructure as public goods so that any local or foreign company, any small startup or a bank or a technology company is able to kind of participate in the market. And therefore, we have seen a lot of very interesting propositions like Google Pay and Phone Pay, in the market. What we are also seeing is like a lot of B2C companies which have grown big are now also bringing in their B2B proposition to help banks and FIs. So we have seen that with Ant Financial as well as Zongen, with Zeditech, and a whole bunch of companies who are bringing B2B propositions to the banks and FIs so that you could do, say, for example, 310 kind loans, to the customers in your region. Now, B2B fintech, has seen a lot of growth, especially in things like digital ID or eKYC. So during COVID-19, a lot of banks and FIs want to open accounts digitally. And so for digital onboarding, they are really making use of all the eKYC, digital ID, cybersecurity, B2B fintech startups which are available. Apart from that, I think there's a new wave of financial infrastructure API companies, for example, Setu or M2P, who are basically helping a new generation of fintech companies or consumer tech companies to issue credit cards using APIs, right? So a lot of work is around how can you sort of demystify and declutter and make it easy for any new company to offer fintech functionality by not going directly to the bank but working with somebody sort of in the middle, right? It used to be Visa, MasterCard in the past, but now there's a whole new generation of companies like Plaid in the US, or as I said, Setu or Niam in Asia, which is very good. I think on the flip side, what we are seeing is that the exits in fintech, the acquisitions in fintech in Asia have been very slow as compared to say US. US has seen a record number of fintech acquisitions, including Plaid, by Visa or Finicity by MasterCard and so on and so forth. There's been a lot of activity, as well as a bunch of IPOs happening in the European and American market. So on those two fronts, I think we have seen less. It's not zero. I mean, there have been a bunch of acquisitions that AMTD has made recently, or Air Securities was acquired by Sophie. So there's a list of companies, but they're not as big and they're not as many, as they used to be. There have been a few, like, PayU acquired Paysense, and so on and so forth. So these are the kind of things that I wanted to share. There's always more to fintech in Asia, but as I said, right, Asia has a whole bunch of frontier fintech markets that everybody is following, and just the opening up of the market is fascinating. And I think it really feels very good that the world is actually looking at Asia to learn about fintech. And that will be my last thought. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Amit. I think that was very insightful for all of us to understand about the Asian landscape and where we're going, especially as compared to what's happening overseas. I think the acquisition story is quite interesting, and post-COVID, it'll also be interesting about how much there is in terms of an acquisition locally in Asia. Right now, over to our panel discussion. Very excited to have on board five brilliant speakers and thought leaders from the region, and briefly introduce each one of them to you. We have Mr. William Bienbao, who's general partner at SOSV and managing director at China Accelerator. They do a lot of work with fintech companies in Asia, in particular those looking to access China, and this includes a bunch of Indian startups who have taken part in the past few years. Secondly is Ms. Sherry Ngai. She is the manager for Hong Kong Science and Technology Park Corporate Venture Fund, and quite actively engaged in the investment landscape in Hong Kong. Third, we have Mr. King Leung. Mr. King Leung is the head of FinTech for Invest Hong Kong and has been a FinTech entrepreneur himself, especially in the InsurTech space prior to his role with Invest Hong Kong. Fourthly, Mr. Chandan Joshi, Senior Vice President and Head of Payments at MobiKwik India, one of India's largest payment players. And prior to that, Chandan had his own startup in the e-commerce space before he was also a trader in Hong Kong and in India. Last but definitely not the least, Mr. Karthik Prabhakaran, who is Executive Director and Partner at Chirate Ventures, formerly known as IDG India, and they have been very active in the fintech space and one of the premier venture players in Indian fintech. So welcome everybody. Great to have you all as part of our session. May I request you to kindly switch on your videos so we can, the audience can have a look at you. Just waiting on William and Chandan.
Hey, sorry, can you unblock my video?
Is your video unlocked? I'll just request the Medici team if they're able to unlock his William's video. Deb?
Yes.
Perfect. Here we have you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. A range and mix of lockdown versions in different parts that where we are, right, and the different interactions. Pleasure to have all of you on board. I will be throwing a bunch of questions. Some I will direct to specific speakers, but I would also be keen to hear everybody's view as you have them. We will have a Q&A session at the end of this panel, so we'll keep about 15 to 20 minutes to take questions from the audience who have dialed in this evening. So to start off with, probably this I will this is open to everybody, just to talk about the local markets you're actively engaged in. It's like, what has been the market's initial response to COVID-19? When I say the market, I'm talking about the broader fintech market and the impact therefore, and what were the key reactions that each of you saw in the industry, right? So we've had, as I said, 3 different stages and 3 different impacts of the virus. We started off with the pandemic, originally having an impact in mainland China. Then you had in Hong Kong. Then things stabilized here. India, it hit late, but now it's peaking. So very different ways of how the economies have been dealing. So how about we start off with William talking to us about the market's initial response to when COVID-19 came to the fore.
Sure. So in China, we first got COVID-19. Most of the people were on vacation anyway with Chinese New Year's, and then there was a delay, people coming back to work. So oftentimes people take 2-3 weeks, sometimes longer, but 2 or 3 week long vacation. And that was then got extended. There was a huge uncertainty. And then we're active in Southeast Asia and India. COVID went to Europe, but parts of Southeast Asia, South Asia started to get locked down. And then, we're also active in FinTech in India. Because we had the insights from China, we were able to tell our portfolio companies across Southeast Asia and South Asia, especially on the loan side, to move away from loans and focus a bit more on collections. And also we had a bit of a change where people were adding on healthcare products, especially insurance. So for the most part, our portfolio of 20 plus fintechs have navigated pretty well. But being nimble was very, very important. And we're not out of it yet. I mean, we're in the middle of a global recession. And so it's going to be pretty tough times. But because everything has gone digital, people accept digital more. The face-to-face relationship is a lot less important now. So we think that we're going to see a huge acceleration in the fintech space, and even from remote payment to loans to insurance. So we're actually pretty positive once we get through this recession, that fintech is going to be a huge beneficiary of this COVID situation.
Well, just to extend on that, William, the urban part of China, especially East China along the coast, has been highly digital. A majority of the internet users are in this belt as we look at it from the center to the east. So with COVID impacting movement of people, right? Did the fact that a majority of payments are done through mobile, etc., help that transformation, or did you see any subtle changes that also took place on the ground, or any transformation on the ground with the broader industry when it came to engaging with fintech or payments, etc.?
No, I mean, nobody here in China uses credit cards or bank cards or cash. So everything, all digital, all payment was basically digital, and already. What we really saw was a market that's already 20+% delivery based. Deliveries just went through the roof. I mean, the average person in China gets like 70, 80 deliveries a year. It's almost triple the US. And this just extended delivery and e-commerce above physical retail. So we think it's a pretty big blow to physical retail. And we think that there's we just saw a huge change. We're now seeing that happen in India. Our portfolio companies are really benefiting from it. Before they were, using online payment to send money home. Now, because there's no banks open, there's no ATMs, they still need some cash, and they're using these sort of digital payment platforms to actually withdraw cash, so they can pay for things, because of the lockdown, they can't actually get out to a bank or to an ATM or to the office or anywhere to get cash. So they can just go downstairs to their local market, and we've digital payment enabled a lot of these mom and pop shops, so they can do food. They can also do payment now. So it's a huge acceleration across South Asia.
Thanks, William. Moving on to the Indian landscape, Chandan, you've been at the thick of it. MobiKwik is one of India's oldest payment players and among the top payment players. And you had the payments for MobiKwik, right? So you've had time to see how things have taken place in mainland China. And post that, the Indian landscape started. There's been a gradual move. You of course had the first lockdown in the end of March, which then extended all the way till end of May before being gradually uplifted, or sorry, lifted rather. What would you say was the initial reaction in India when it came to COVID-19 from a market perspective? And secondly, how has the industry been coping with the changes over the last 2-3 months?
Yeah, sure, Moshe. So, first initial reaction, was of course for shock. I would say all across. Although it started in China and Hong Kong earlier, so we were expecting it at some point in time. It is going to happen, and lot of businesses changed, a lot of business practices changed, customer interests also changed, and all different companies in all different, I would say, sectors, they all reacted, in their own unique ways, and I would say adopted to the new kind of, normal. It's still skyrocketing here in India, although there is no lockdown. But to begin with, the immediate impact of, on payment space specifically, if we talk about it, the immediate impact on it was from the point of, significant drop in business, significant drop in number of transactions across the platforms, I would say, because the people stopped ordering anything from e-commerce, and initial few weeks were the services, I would say, home delivery was also not set up, and the rules and regulations were not clear in the beginning. So there was a significant drop in terms of, anybody, buying anything. In a matter of 7 to 10 days, I would say, things started, being clarified in terms of regulation, that how some businesses, essential services effectively can be run, and some practices were effectively communicated clearly by the government. And then businesses started opening up. And after, I would say, initial week, we also did, completely revamped our app. We launched a essential services section, where we anyway have a lot of merchants, offline merchants, which we have, who accept payments from from MobiKwik as a payment option. So they all they are anyway listed on our app, but we brought it all to the front of the app, so that when user comes to the app, they can actually order their essential services, for example, grocery or medicines, or food from their nearest restaurant, which was still operating and willing. So we highlighted those things to the top. In addition to that, like, for example, Prime Minister Relief Fund, we brought it to the top, where people can actually make donations for Corona. So this was done pretty quickly, and after that, we clearly see a divergence, I would say, in terms of businesses adapting and adopting and recovering from this. So, for example, travel was completely shut off, which had a significant business. Business loss, and some of the banks, they changed limits for transactions and credit lines and everything for all the risky industries, which were kind of immediately impacted. So that effectively created a spiral for some of the companies in, I would say, travel space and food and retail space. However, there were a few categories which significantly improved in terms of how many transactions were happening. So, for example, grocery services, home delivery services for grocery, medicines, and of course, education, as we all know, online, sudden interest was there in OTT platforms. So during this period, so this divergence was there. I would say now, if you think about it today, and of course, different companies, they came up with different practices. So some companies, they immediately, announced pay cuts to cut costs, and and some companies, effectively got rid of people. They let people go as well. However, we didn't do anything like that, and in fact, we continued to hire. So around 40 to 50 people, they joined in the last 3 months, who were supposed to join. Their joining dates were deferred for a bit, but then they eventually did end up joining. Now, when I look back to pre-March, to the March volume, and for the month of June, majority of our businesses, they are kind of just 3 or 4 categories which are there. For example, loan repayment, as William, you were also talking about it. So that is still being impacted because of government moratorium, and a lot of people have opted for that moratorium, and they are not paying EMIs. That is until August end. So that is all going to start in the first week of September, I would say. That business is going to come back. Now, cab services, Ola and Uber, they are operating, but again, because trend has changed, or most of the companies are still allowing employees to work from home. In fact, we are also working from home, since I would say 16th of March, and we don't have any plan as of now to open our offices as of now. So like cab services, travel, I would say IRCTC, bus bookings, all restaurants, hotel bookings, all this space is still significantly impacted. But good part that we've seen is, there is a strong, I would say earlier, digital payment was kind of push that we were coming up with ideas. We were trying to incentivize users, and we were pushing that, you should start paying digitally. However, during the immediate impact of COVID, it has been that, now that the pull from customer is there, people do not want to use cash. So they really are trying to download all the apps and come up with digital mode of payments for all the services. So, that's, and that trend we believe will continue to be there, at least in the foreseeable future. So, yeah.
Thanks, Chandan. I think that's gives a good insight starting from where it was and where it is now. We are, as you said, there's a big push both from the government and the RBI on getting people to actively use digital payments to encourage social distancing, as it were. With the lockdown ending, I think the volumes have started picking back up as well in India. Karthik, just quickly, moving to you with regards to to continue the conversation on India. Anything you would like to add from what Chandan was talking about? I will come to the investment aspect of things later in the conversation, but from a market perspective, from your portfolio companies, what have you been noticing?
Sure. So I guess Chandan covered quite comprehensively, but just to try and add to that in a small way, I think in general, 2-3 significant things that we've noticed in our portfolio. One is clearly in the lending space. It's an overhang from last year of the financial industry itself having an overhang from that. But the good part is some of the lending companies have been cautious because of that. So it's less about COVID, but because of how the financial industry has been progressing, where some of them have been pretty cautious in terms of collections and focusing extensively on collections. So what we have seen is some such lending companies have been able to pull back and collect and sit on cash right now. So the flip side of that is loans are not easily available and there is no demand as well. But one is sitting on cash and liquidity to essentially see where consumption kind of starts off. That's one. The second thing is, while there was a significant dip in consumption, and it still is picking up. One small metric is we actually tried to do that analysis of how businesses have picked up across segments and across sectors, which is a proxy for payments as well. Across more than 50 of our portfolio companies, when I look at it, the combined revenues is actually almost back to 80% of what it was in March. So what one was expecting that the recovery will be much, much longer. There are some early green shoots that it may actually be sooner, but obviously subject to maybe a second wave and so many things which are impacting. The third part, which I would like to highlight, is how the digital payments actually picked up. And just one small data point was, I think May, the UPI payments were actually 30% higher than what it was in March or April. So clear shift to that, and even the urban consumer who would otherwise use a credit card is actually resorting to QR codes and UPI payments, which is actually a good sign, which is only going to take it to the next level in terms of the nook and corner of the country on digital payments.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Those three parts are quite important. Digital payments, I think one of the other elements, as I've mentioned in the presentation, was internet users. Right? We've doubled that over the last 2.5 years, and that's likely to grow in the world's cheapest market for data. And what will be Jio's ambitions post this tie-up with Facebook and others would be quite an interesting thing to see. Coming to Hong Kong, and another topic too, and it's not just looking at Hong Kong, but Sherry, you have this experience of looking at how Hong Kong has handle this situation, but also we have been talking about the general digital banking payments landscape. William briefly touched about the health tech and healthcare side of things. So it'd be good to understand from what you feel has been the response of the market from an insurance perspective and the insurtech perspective, and of course about how you've seen Hong Kong respond to it, and we'll also get King's view on this post that.
Great. Thank you for the question. I would speak from my interactions and experiences with our portfolio companies. So I think the number one impact to the fintech startups is definitely on cash flow. For startups that are tight on cash, they have to, and we encourage them to make sure that there's a reasonably long runway, meaning 12 to 18 months during an economic downturn. So startups are surely putting more efforts into managing both their fundraising schedule and cost-cutting measures. And by cost-cutting, it means renegotiating payment terms and leases with your suppliers, your buyers, and your landlord. Here in Hong Kong, and luckily here at Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, we did offer a 6-month full rental waiver since April this year. So to alleviate the operational pressures for some of our startups and to help them retain R&D talent. But at the same time, a portion of our portfolio companies are actually still quite early stage, working on R&D and product development. So for these startups, as long as they maintain a healthy control in expenses, they are less impacted. So they can even take this opportunity to harness talents. And for some of our insurtech portfolio companies, like William just mentioned, they even benefit from this market dynamic. Because people's awareness of healthcare increased and more people access to digital health platform.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. King, just on Hong Kong's response, we've been in the middle of this for almost 7 months or 6 months now, right? Since January, but we returned to a fairly normal situation very quickly. I would say we never had a full lockdown as other countries have had, and fintech has been something that we've been looking for changes. One of the questions on the panels, as well as just general, is that the virtual banks are now going live. We have had new licenses for insurtech players as well by the Hong Kong regulator. So how have you seen the initial response? Are we seeing changes on the ground on what has been largely a cash economy or an octopus plus cash economy? What are the changes you've seen from the Hong Kong fintech landscape?
Well, it's a complex question in a way, because there are just so many different segments of companies. And I would like to echo to Sherry's point. It really depends on what stage and the nature of the company is. So I guess in the interest of time, I would just want to quickly highlight 3 types of companies that we came across. So obviously, the first type is what Sherry described. They're still relatively in the early stage, still in the building up mode. That includes the 8 virtual banks and also some of the incoming digital insurers. Now, interestingly, when we talk to these folks, big and small, like the virtual bank, like the ZA, the bow tie of the world. Now, basically, they were just saying that over the past year, they've been working remotely from home, and they were just half-jokingly saying that ZA, for example, they are probably the only virtual bank on the planet that basically built up the entire operation with all the staff working from home. So it is happening, and so that for that segment, they're doing fine. Now, the second segments of companies are I would say the B2B solution providers, in which the solutions are already mature enough to go to market. So for those that have already begun the BD process, so I just want to perhaps cite one example to put things in context. So there's a company called Ecomon. It's a wealth tech company, and so they've been doing all these like robo-advisory kind of platform that they mostly focus their energy in providing the platform to the medium-sized banks in Hong Kong. Obviously, some of them are larger in size, but by and large, the mid-sized banks. And since they already closed the deal before the pandemic hits, so they've been doing reasonably well, because at the end of the day, by having this capability for the medium-sized banks, then the banks are able to, in a way, maintain a certain level of service quality, right? In terms of client advisory. So in this particular group of companies, they are also doing reasonably okay. All right. Now the third group of companies would be the ones that is in different areas of B2C. So it can be payments, it can be lending, and so on. Now, and for this, I think the experience for these guys are all over the place. Now, some of them have been doing reasonably well in other parts of the world, because I just spoke with the country manager of a Singaporean-based payments company that just set up shop in Hong Kong last year. So they have all the plan in place, and pretty ambitious ones too. So both B2C lending and also SME lending. Now, but because of COVID, they basically have to put everything on hold because of the whole sort of the consumer-facing elements that you just have to stop. Now, so I think all in all, I would say that because of just the mix that we have, because Hong Kong has been growing the ecosystem for quite some time, we have a relatively diverse mix of companies. So all in all, I think we are doing okay. And for the ones that are still hurting, so again, from a government standpoint, we're trying to do the best we can to help them in terms of government subsidies, get them more information, business introductions, connections to the VCs and whatnot. So we're just doing the best we can to help those who are in need.
Thank you, King. Will, coming back to you, the next one would be with regards to, we've seen the landscape, we've seen an impact on overall fintech. Largely, people are bullish on certain sections, but things like in India, when we spoke about, lending has got badly impacted, payments got impacted, and we also saw quite a few well-funded startups decide to furlough people, or in a couple of cases globally even shut down, right? How has been and Amit in the presentation also showcased what's been the investment landscape over the last 6 months, but on the ground, right? How have you seen that impact investors specifically when it comes to fintech, right? Have they, reduced their funding or investment rather, or have they increased it? Or if they have, what has been the changes you guys have done, as well as what you're seeing in the industry locally on mainland?
Okay. Well, I think the the good news is that when we have, again, I cannot say that I talk to everybody, but at least for those investors that I got a chance to talk to over the past few months. Now, by and large, I think the sentiment has been quite consistent. So investors have been more cautious than before. So they would be looking at the companies, whether they're more, I would say, resilient or post-COVID ready, which is kind of like a new metric for investment, if you will. So definitely they're more cautious. Now, but then are they scaling back? At least from what we have seen, they have not. So obviously, I think the ones that are more active, like AMTD, I'm sure that many of you might be sort of seeing news about AMTD acquisition, investment, almost like every month. So AMTD is still very active. And then we also talk to other, I would say, incubators / early stage investor like Betatron, for example. So they are launching the next cohort. As a matter of fact, I think this month. So each company they'll be investing in them $500,000 US. And then there are other investors that I don't want to steal thunder. I would like perhaps Sherry to share her observations too. But basically, for Cyberport and Science Park, the government-funded organizations, they have the mandates to co-invest with private investor, but then they definitely have a lot of gunpowder, waiting to be deployed. So all in all, yes, it's more cautious, but at the same time, we're also seeing a different level of investment activities.
William, what about the state of play in mainland China? What are we seeing as the models of investment, and what has been the general trend when it came to investing over the last 5 months? I'll come to what's the trend for the future in a little bit. Okay,
so to be very frank, most of my fintech investments right now are, I just did 4 since December, and they're around blockchain fintech. So they're sort of border agnostic. We're focused on blockchain fintech back in 2015, 2016 with BitMEX. We did 4 investments. BitMEX is reportedly worth $8 billion as of 2 years ago, based on their profit. And then we took a bit of a break from blockchain fintech. We revisited. I came back to it at the end of last year because I think it's time for products in this area. It's a bit, it's a bit strange for a traditional equity, investing VC like me to go into this area. But we invest, we take equity, and we think that the move to digitization has been very, very positive. Crypto investment trading volumes have tripled over the last year, and it's time for products there. So overall, we're pretty bullish on the product side of crypto fintech. In terms of traditional stuff, we haven't seen a whole lot of movement within China. I think there's a lot more action outside. The bigger have gotten huge in China, and there's not a lot of space. Probably more in insurance, which is where we have the Care Voice and Startup Care. But we haven't really seen, the payments pretty much done, right? Microloans, P2P is gone, and the loans pretty much done. So, what's left? It's all about the products.
And where is, what kind of investment are you seeing? Are you seeing early stage investments happening? Because the general data seems to be that it's slowed down, especially, naturally because of the lockdowns, there was one slowdown, but general data seems to be indicating that there was a significant slowdown in overall funding on mainland China as compared to 2019. So any views from the ground in terms of what's happening? Is it more like King mentioned, a lot of gunpowder being kept aside for further investments? Or is it just a case of, okay, let's just wait and see what happens to the industry before we change things?
Yes. It's like 6 months of history, so I'll try and do it really quickly. But what happened is, everybody goes on break for Chinese New Year. So a lot of deals get done before Chinese New Year's or Lunar New Year. Then after, people kind of come back and things are negotiated and finally get closed. So that happened. So you had January, February was down. Year over year, it was down pretty significantly. And then March came back up also pretty significantly. And this is across the board, across industries, basically because deals that got negotiated before the Lunar New Year got done. So what's happened since then? Not a whole lot. Like, deals are happening. I'd say you're seeing later stage deals, and this is across Asia, early stage deals more than sort of that mid stage. Fintech in China, as I just mentioned, is not, as far as I know, the most popular sector right now. It's down. It is popular. It's in the top 10, but it's like number 9, number 10 in terms of where people are focusing at this point.
Okay, thank you. Karthik, what do you see happening in India? Like, what happened? It would be good for the audience to understand how things changed from an investment landscape. Quite a bit of, as Bill was pointing, would have been potentially deals negotiated previously, but what are you seeing generally as a trend in the investment side? And what are you guys as Chirate, how are you approaching this for investing currently?
Sure. So in general, I think the most investors' reactions have been to focus inwards and look at existing investments and look at what are the risks there and make sure that they are well set up for success. And as I think somebody else was pointing out, to look at their cash runways, ensuring that they are in a good position. And having said that, I think in terms of new investments, it's a very natural reaction to take a pause and look inwards, which is what the market has pretty much done, especially during the lockdown. But new investments are taking place, far and few, of course. But interestingly, I think 2-3 segments where clearly there has been a positive impact of COVID, which pretty much has created an inflection point for many of these companies which were waiting for consumer adoption to happen, be it in the edtech space or in some elements of SaaS, where I think new investments as well, not just the deals which have already been negotiated pre-COVID, are also taking place. Fintech in general, it has taken a slow path. And as William has pointed out in China, similar in India as well, I think in terms of new deals, clearly lending is something which everyone's waiting and just checking out what's happening. So lending is far from investments coming through, but technology and product oriented companies are being looked at. This also includes how, if I take an example, how insurance is more and more personalized, and how can you use data which you're actually having to personalize and customize insurance as one example. And somebody talked about Setu as an example, which is trying to create opportunities for consumer companies to create more financial product access. I think these are explorations which are continuing to happen. But investments will continue to be far and few, at least for the next 1 or 2 months, purely from the perspective that investors early stage typically expect to meet the teams in person. I think it's more of a subjective call that one takes. So to that extent, that definitely is a limiting factor. But everyone's also trying to figure out ways to overcome that. And that's what venture investors are and entrepreneurs are, which are eternal optimists. So we at Shirate also are looking at how do we actually keep doing that. And if the entrepreneur is in the same city, then we can, of course, meet them with appropriate social distancing norms. But if they're in a different city, then can we partner and co-invest with somebody who is in that city? And earlier, a co-investor would be co-opted for strategic purpose, and here it is for this is the strategic purpose. So these are some of the ways everyone's adapting to it.
You're doing too much. You don't have to do that. That's what we're hired to do.
Sorry,
You're literally doing their job for them.
Yeah. One of the things with Zoom, right? The social distancing goes away, but you can't control who's talking. Thank you, Karthik. I think that's pertinent. But just quick follow-up question would be post-COVID, right? Which we hope is sooner than later. But let's assume there is a new normal that is achieved. There is a way that the country is figure out a way to handle with it, maybe through treatments, vaccines, whatever, and get a grip on that. What would be for you the key sectors in fintech to invest in? Let's say 2021, if you had to target your key investment sectors, what would they be?
I think within fintech, it would be a lot more product innovation, and it would also be technology which is powering finance and payments, and a lot more infra technology, a lot more SaaS solutions. So more on the enterprise side to a large extent. I think consumer fintech is something where I think there is enough which is already there in the market. One is looking at how do these scale up, and more customizable solutions in terms of fintech is another solution one could look at from a consumer standpoint.
Thank you. Sherry, coming to you, and King also is looking at it. So 2 points. One, in terms of HKSTP Ventures, how has your approach been to investment? When you are looking at a government-backed fund, in some senses, there are certain other priorities for you, not just large profit making or exits. But what are the areas? How have you dealt with the lockdown and impact on fintech in terms of your investments? And secondly, what are the areas that you are looking to target in the coming months from an investment perspective that you feel will grow?
Great, thank you. So I think on the VC investment side, we are very optimistic, and you're right, and King is right. As a VC fund with government as an LP, we do have the dry powder to invest, and we do have the mission to encourage our co-investor partners to invest. And not just for the vision, and we are also very financially driven because our co-investment partners will be financially driven as well. And of course, investment activity would not be as crazy as the last 2 years because of the limited travel, and VC will have to reserve more of its capital to existing portfolio companies. But my personal experience is that VC is still pretty active. And in terms of areas that we will look for to be very honest, we, and I think most of the VCs out there, are still mapping out the investment strategy post-COVID for fintechs. But in general, I think if you hold the belief that, at least for us, we hold the belief that the future trend of fintech will be guided by the new world of banking and insurance fragmentation, then COVID-19 will only mean that COVID-19 will accelerate this transformation, because customer will have a much higher expectation on digital experience, but the incumbents will not be able to respond to this higher expectation as fast as fintech startups. So fintech startups will capture the values at where Gen Z will bank at, and traditional banks will turn itself probably to backbone infrastructure support. So under this big framework, I think, we will look at tech startups that would help banks, insurance to compete on operational efficiencies. So, enterprise solutions. Companies to mention in Hong Kong would be Final Labs and Cluster AI. That would be good examples. Another segment we will look at will be startups that would generally facilitate open banking. So 40% of the banks in APAC start having API platforms to permit customers to share their own transaction data with third parties. So companies like Bino40, Planto in Hong Kong. And finally, I will conclude with the last point that, because of the increased awareness of health, insurtech companies that can make or nudge their policyholders to become healthier will be something that is easy as well.
Okay, let's hope that's the case. We hope. I think insurtech definitely is a space that people are looking for, and we do ideally hope that the incumbents can also respond. But I guess the agility is always going to be a point, right? So Chandan, as a fintech, albeit an older fintech, what are you guys looking to respond, and how are you seeing the new landscape, right? On one hand, from a payments perspective, if volumes go back to pre-COVID levels, or at least close to COVID levels, then there's obviously a build that you can continue. As you mentioned previously, you've, as MobiKwik, you've hired people, so which is a good sign in this economy. What are your focuses going forward, and how do you see the industry adapting to this new normal and taking things further for India's 700 million internet users who are slowly getting onto the digital payment landscape?
So I would like to split the question into two parts. One is B2B space. How we as a payment partner for other companies, we add value there in the ecosystem. So during this period, there has been a lot of interest, inbound interest, I would say, from companies that we don't even expect. Which is large retail organizations, for example, to consider launching digital, payment services. So white label products, if they can get their own wallet, they are not experts, in that, but they have been, we have been exploring a lot of opportunities in that space. And I think in next, few months, we will be announcing some of those things as well, where effectively what we are doing is we are powering already acquired users of large organizations, and we provide them a platform where they can retain them, they can engage them, they can nudge them, as Sherry said, at the right time for insurance, if they want to launch. So that creates two things. One is most of these people, they, their user retention improves. Secondly, you can add additional lines of revenue as well. Effectively, everybody wants to be owner. So again, UPI, as it is, it's an open platform. Anyone can start accepting payments via UPI straightforward, and adding a top layer of the product in which you can handle the user data, high influx of user data. So people are approaching us to provide, some of these services to B2B partners via our APIs, or providing a white label product straightforward. So that is like B2B perspective. So a lot of interest is coming in from our partners. Second is, as I mentioned earlier, from customer perspective, we are seeing a lot of traction. So earlier it used to be the case that So we also launched, on our platform, Corona Insurance in partnership with couple of, insurers, at the beginning of the crisis, and it did pretty well. We provided free Corona insurance to all our, employees as well. So what's happening is that all the users who are they are also coming up with ideas and pushing us to innovate now. For us users is some of these companies as well, online e-commerce companies. Earlier it used to be the case that we used to push them with new products that to improve the flow, to improve the customer journey. That we used to come back with them, with ideas that how can we increase the success rate of a transaction, or decrease drop rates and all those things. But now during the crisis, the thought process has changed. People are, I think everyone has used 3 or 4 months to analyze the inefficiencies, operational inefficiencies in their businesses, and now they are coming up with ideas that how can we improve the flow, how can we increase the success rate, so those kind of things are happening. So I see that the trend will definitely continue, and it's all good for payment companies which are payment partners, like us, which are who are there in the space for a long period in time, and deep rooted in the Indian fintech ecosystem. So that's like the broad trend.
Thank you, Chandan. Before we go to the questions, one question to all the panelists, I'll go one by one, is your views on cross-border impact, right, on of COVID-19 on cross-border, on fintech, right? We're just talking about, is it enabling, is it stopping? And let's start with King. Hong Kong has always been the super connector between Asian countries, and fintech has been one of our backbones. So how are you seeing that happen what's the landscape you're seeing right now for cross-border fintech collaboration or movement?
Well, the short answer is it depends, because again, there are different segments. I've been looking at my personal experience in dealing with the different fintechs coming to us where we can offer them help. So obviously the payments, the remittances companies, there's just so many of them from all angles. So I think that is still much more active than I expected, to be honest. So that trend is still happening. Obviously, COVID has put some of their plans on hold. But again, given the size of Hong Kong as a city, the amount of cross-border transactions is just enormous. Now, but the other thing I just want to quickly highlight is the digital asset space. In fact, over the past few months, I've been having so many Zoom calls with folks from the US. In fact, I just had a call with Israel about companies in the digital asset space. Some of them want to be, in a way, branching out of their activities to include Asia in their portfolio. And they definitely see Hong Kong, particularly with the upcoming license for crypto exchange offered by SFC. So people are hopeful to see some licenses to be given out this year. So that, in a way, has created quite a lot of enthusiasm and positive expectation. So as a result, it's not exactly cross-border per se, but since crypto is traded basically globally, so that's why a lot of these international players are now seriously looking at Hong Kong. And again, looking at my own personal experience in the last 12 months, definitely in the last, I would say now it's July, the last 3 months, I have met virtually so many digital assets companies from all around the world, particularly US and Israel and so on. Yeah, so the momentum is quite strong.
Yeah, thank you. Sherry, anything to add from what Science Park is looking, especially considering you look at more deep tech? We've had some very smart AI companies come out of Science Park, as well as some RegTech. So what are your views on the cross-border fintech movement?
Sure. I think King already gave a really good answer, but I would just have a small point to add. I mean, given the China-US tension and more Chinese companies coming to Hong Kong for IPO, Ken mentioned, the momentum for cross-border investments definitely still there. And particularly we highlight on the startups where their use case is, kind of the application and use case is global. For example, we see a trend of more investments going into enterprise solution startups, where they usually have a cross-border application where they're not bound by geography. And those startups are usually also supported by core technology like AI, machine learning. And there have been investments of 7 billion in Q1 of 2019 to 10 billion of investments in Q1 2020 just for B2B fintech startups. And also a good example to mention in Hong Kong would be Air Wallets actually bagged 116 million Series D in April to expand their cross-border financial product portfolio. So just a small point to add.
I think that also combines well with what we're seeing with AMTD's acquisitions in Southeast Asia, right? And a couple of moves in locally. William, there was a question, so I'm borrowing from that question as well as talking about it in terms of the expansion of Chinese fintech companies in Asia, which has largely been ASEAN plus a bit of Middle East. What are you seeing? Would that continue? And a top-up question on that has been, do you think that the Asian fintech landscape is homogeneous?
Okay, so the first thing is that the Chinese fintechs tried to go to Southeast Asia to do P2P loans, and they all got shut down, right? So Indonesia said, not going to do it here. Malaysia, there's a bunch, but for the most part, it's been very, very tough. I don't think that the fintech space in Southeast Asia has been really fertile soil for the Chinese coming down. Alibaba has done reasonably well because they came in early and they're big and people wanted their support. But for the small guys, it didn't translate too well, and there was a lot of local backlash. In terms of cross-border, we are, SOSV, but for China Accelerator and Mox, which I run with Oscar, I mean, we're focused, we do cross-border. Our tagline is like cross-border internet. So we're big fans. And I think the opportunity for Hong Kong, which is now more and more, I guess, unfortunately, part of China. We invested in BitMEX. We helped them expand outside of Hong Kong. They became the most valuable startup in the history of Hong Kong, according to the press, and not based on a VC valuation, but based on their net income. So we're huge fans of cross-border. Innovation doesn't really have borders, and we're very hopeful that the decoupling that's starting to happen is broken down by technology. So we're huge supporters of that, especially because we're the first accelerator in Asia run by a bunch of non-Chinese operating out of Shanghai and Taipei and Shenzhen and now Delhi and KL. So.
Thanks, Phil. I want to come to Karthik. Karthik, we know each other from our engineering days. I won't tell people how many years back that is. But we met post-engineering, about 10, 12 years in Hong Kong because you were here for speaking to some investors and looking at some portfolio companies. So cross-border is inherently there in Chirate's investment thesis in some senses. So how are you seeing that cross-border fintech taking place? A lot of Indian companies are keen to take their model and expand to ASEAN and the Middle East, where they feel it's very fertile for that application, minus UPI, but still there's that push, especially in B2B. So what are your views on cross-border fintech?
So specifically within fintech, I think given the current environment that is in everywhere, I guess consumer startups, I think there will be some delays and lags where most of the consumer fintech companies will be mostly inward focused, but technology companies where they're core products, definitely there is a lot of scope for that, which continues to happen because the large markets are global in nature and the opportunity set is actually global. So I would actually distinguish from consumer companies and non-consumer companies in terms of their approach in the short to medium term.
Yeah, thank you. Chandan, I'm going to just turn tracks a little bit and get your viewpoints on the ecosystem overall, right? How are we doing on a cross-border interaction perspective, right? As a large fintech base in India, how do you work with partners who are coming in from overseas, or when you are looking at plans to go overseas, or if you have those entities overseas, how do you guys interact? What are the key elements that some of the other fintechs who are looking to go cross border need to be aware of, especially when they're coming into India or dealing with Indian fintech?
Right. So the way, so as a company, we are about to launch in one of the countries here in Nepal. First international partnership, for us, which will be announced, which will be launched. But apart from that, as a company, we haven't really explored, for ourselves, we haven't explored, other international partnerships. However, we are getting approached now by a lot of companies, I would say, in fact, in Africa as well, where a lot of the products and services that we have built, they are looking for us to provide them, or maybe power for them, in better partnerships. Another inbound interest, I would say, in terms of investments, is coming in, is happening as William was mentioning about BitMEX. So cryptocurrencies, they are seeing a lot of traction in last 3 to 4 months here in India, since the government regulation, Supreme Court order which came out, and suddenly significant volume of transactions have started picking up, and we have also received a lot of interest from people across the world who want to come to India, because we are a payment partner. We are a payment partner to all businesses, and we have seen that segment also grow significantly, and so inbound interest to acquire more Indian customers, and for cryptocurrencies, that is significantly happening, and I believe that in next few months or year, we'll see significant consolidation in that space, as the market matures here with the right kind of regulation, which is being provided by, I would say, the government. So that's kind of about it.
Yeah, William, go on.
A fiat on-ramp for crypto in India?
Sorry?
Are you willing to be a fiat on-ramp? So from rupees to Bitcoin in India for your customers? Is that something we can turn on? A fiat on-ramp, rupees to Bitcoin.
I wouldn't like to answer it here.
He's pleading his Second Amendment, right? Well, William, one of the things that's happening right now in the Indian crypto landscape is that there is a report or pending in with the government, right? Where
so just to clarify on that, as a wallet, we are MobiKwik wallet is powering payments on, I would say, 70 to 80% of the crypto exchanges here in India. So we are powering payments for that.
I'll connect you guys post the panel for what can be done. So my closing question, rather than the question, it's about what would be a company you think has really showcased itself during COVID-19 and is going to come out stronger as we move forward, right? Other than companies you've already mentioned, I would leave BitMEX out of that. But any other companies other than your own firm or ones you've mentioned, what do you think is going to be the strong? What have you seen as in your local jurisdictions as a strong fintech player who has showcased their products well, serviced their customers, and are going to come out stronger on the other side of 2020? So let's start with William.
Okay, I got a really weird one. Our company is that was a registered lender, or they are a registered lender in Indonesia. And now they're one of the 33 companies in Indonesia to have a full lending license, P2P. And so one of the things that they developed using some pretty cool algorithms is a distributed, sort of decentralized, crowdsourced collection platform. So the challenge with all these small loans and is actually collecting the money. And so they've built this platform. And the interesting thing is that they've made the platform available to the industry. They're not really charging so much for it. It's more like a bit of a service. And when I say collections, it's not a bunch of mafia guys with like baseball bats. It's more like as nudges. Okay, it's more like hey, people in the community can nudge you to pay back. So it's crowdsourced collections of loans. It seems to be working very well. So if anybody needs to nudge their customers to pay back, please get in touch with Pinjam Win-Win.
Thank you, William. Sherry, what have you been seeing? Something in the insurance space you think that you want to mention?
Sure. I will highlight Fanolab, a Hong Kong-based company, an NLP solution for banks and insurers in the languages of Cantonese, Singlish, and other SEA languages. They're definitely a good example of how they benefit from the acceleration of digital transformation because of COVID-19. Indeed, they recently won a contract with government body for their call center because of a very interesting reason. A lot of the government branches shut down due to COVID-19, so the call center got a huge lot more traffic that their existing manpower cannot handle. So they had to turn to this fintech company for help in order to automate the calls. So this is one example I've mentioned. Another quick example, just to name it, is here in Hong Kong, there's a company called HKTV Mall, a homegrown online shopping platform, who announced that earlier that they would develop their own e-wallet. So it's very interesting, kind of example of like fintech turning to tech fin, where e-commerce companies starting to build their own banking products and services.
Yeah, that going back to the Alipay model, right, where Ant Financial build this out. Very, very interesting. Yeah, Karthik, what from you would be that one interesting company you'd like to highlight?
I think going by the flavor of this conversation of cross-border, I will highlight a company called Crystal. Actually cross-border with presence in Hong Kong, Singapore, India, in the digital wealth management space, which I feel now with more and more people looking at opportunities across the globe, I think that's one company where there would be quite some interest.
Thank you. King, what would you think if you had to name another Hong Kong company?
Well, I guess I would be going off a different angle to answer this question. Instead of naming one particular company, I would like to pick on one subsegment that I believe, together with my colleagues, we believe will do well over the next 18 months or so. And that is the B2A segments in the insurtech space. So there's a business to agents angle. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because I think for those of you who have been following, I'm sure this happens in other parts of the world. It's just that in Hong Kong, it's a pretty dense market from an insurance standpoint. So a lot of annual premiums being written. But interestingly, because of the legacy reason, a big chunk of I believe to my recollection, Hong Kong sold something like 500 billion Hong Kong dollars of annual premiums every year. But then a lion's share, like 80% of them or more, were sold via the insurance agents. So face to face. Now, of course, with the COVID, and all these things are almost like ground to a halt, at least in the past few months. So as a result, any technology that can still allow the insurance companies, particularly the insurance agents, to carry on the business is going to be a big win. So of course, I think in the past 2 months, the local authority has been rushing out some new regulation allowing remote, logging of the conversation, so that in a way the insurance company can then transact online. So anything along those lines over the next 18 months would be a good win in terms of getting very, very good traction.
Chandan, last word to you. We are on dot with finishing. So 30 seconds. One company other than MobiKwik, if you had to pick, who will come out of this stronger? Chandan, you're on mute.
Yeah, so in edtech space, there is a company called Doubtnut. So they, I think Karthik will be able to share more details about it. But the point is, it significantly benefited because all the students and children were working from home. As the name says, Doubtnut. So it helps you solve your doubt. You can ask questions from the app and you get answers for simple problems which school going kids or students have. The model for them, it was not really, they were not looking to generate a lot of revenue, but I think they ended up acquiring, I would say, around 25 to 30 million customers in 3 to 4 months of lockdown, because suddenly, few million to 25, 30, it's significant, scale up which happened. And it really gives an idea about how things can change suddenly for for any business. And I think it's in talks to be acquired by large ad tech company here in India for a few $100 million. Just a matter of 3-4 months.
Right time, right place, and right growth. So thank you all. Been a pleasure having you. It's been a lot of insights, a lot of learning for me as well. Understanding the three landscape, I think the audience has learned quite a bit from insights across investment, what are fintech companies doing yourselves, and what's happening cross border. We hope that things turn positive going forward, and we can see the renaissance of fintech 3.0, as I call it, before the tech fins take over in 2025. So thank you all. Thank you again to Medici for hosting us on our live platforms across various streams. And please feel free to come and join us on the virtual FinTech Fair, which is virtualfintechfair.com. So take care and have a nice rest of the day. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.